Kind of another area, Cameron, that you mentioned that I think is getting more attention today is the whole, freight audit and payment side of things. And you mentioned self-invoicing. Can you describe a little bit about what you're doing there and how you leverage the TMS to do that?
Yeah, we didn't want to, we have contracted rates with our carriers, contracted accessorial schedules, fuel schedules, all that. So we didn't find it necessary to continue to make our carriers have clerks that send paper bills. And we all know how expensive it is to process a bill. And so we use a self-invoicing process in the TMS because we already have everything contracted. Everything except for unplanned accessorials are already agreed upon. If those come up, there's a way to get those approved and into the payment process. But essentially, everything flows a lot faster, and we pay the carriers a lot faster because they're not having to create that bill for us. So that saves them time, it saves us time, and we pay them a lot faster. And one of the things I think is important is if you can keep their costs down, you're not going to experience the same rate increases that everyone else is seeing nationally.
Yeah, that's another great point and another component of being a carrier-friendly shipper. Mike, I mean, are you seeing other shippers move in the same direction? Implementing self-invoicing, and kind of is the role of freight audit payment changing or different today than it was in the past?
Well, the role of freight audit and payment is much different today than it was in the past. There's been a significant evolution, and some of the things that we are seeing, one of those areas where there's been tremendous changes is what Cameron's talking about, is the whole area of what we call the auto pay process. And once again, to Cameron's credit and Idahoan's credit, what they're really good at is, and one of the reasons they're the profitable company they are, is they're taking a look at where do we eliminate waste. And practically speaking, not for every shipment, but where you have a shipment where there's a high degree of predictability and a high degree of accuracy, instead of having the carrier have to submit a freight bill, we can go ahead and get that freight bill paid off of what's coming off of the TMS. Now, in order to do that, and it's really important because I think some companies would like to think that they're auto pay capable, but practically speaking, they blow through some important controls. What Cameron referred to there is they know the rate at the time of shipment. They have contracts with their carriers. They've screened their carriers. They have defined accessorials. So when a shipment's being prepared, when it's being tendered to the carrier, when that shipment leaves the dock, we can say with a very high degree of certainty that the cost for that shipment is going to be $500. Now, what Cameron was also referring to is what do you have with the undefined accessorials, things like, for example, what we were just talking about a minute ago, detention. Well, Idahoan has a process whereby they can approve that and get the carrier paid. And so once again, it involves streamlining their processes. And one of the things, Adrian, I just do want to highlight, because I think Cameron and Idahoan have been very good in this regard, is one of the things we talked about last week was the 3 Ps for sustained transportation savings: practices, processes, and pricing. A lot of companies focus on pricing, but they don't really spend as much time on the processes and practices. And when you spend time there and dedicate yourself to eliminating waste, auto pay is one of the things that just comes up to the surface, and you say, why not do it that way? It's eminently more effective. The carriers get paid in a timely manner. That shipper of choice issue, you can help with the rates that you're getting from the carriers. Idahoan, by the way, not related to a TMS, but one of the things, Cameron, you might just talk about was the cement pad you built for some of your carriers so that they could drop trailers, and how that led to a reduction in cost for Idahoan. Could you just briefly hammer on that one for a minute?
Yeah, when I first started with the company, we would have trucks miles all the way to the highway backed up trying to load. And so we spent some money, as Mike mentioned, putting in cement pads, making sure that there was places for them to drop their trailers. And we went from spending thousands and thousands of dollars of detention every month to we have very little detention on the shipping side. We now get to work with some of our customers to see if we can work on the receiving side.
Great. Another great example. I think going back to the freight audit and payment, it's been a topic that we've talked about here at Talking Logistics for quite some time. And my perspective is that going back to visibility and BI, the wealth of data that comes out of that whole process helps create that feedback loop to provide additional insight into what's happening into your operations.